House will please be in order. Those persons not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. All members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by the gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Honaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for your love and your mercy and your blessings. Father, we just pray today that by the presence of your Spirit, you will lead, guide, and direct us. God, give us courage that is tempered with kindness and boldness, that is tempered with patience, and as the Word of God says, Father, let our speech always be gracious and seasoned with salt, so that we would know how to answer each other, and let our conversations always be full of grace. And Father, we just thank you for this body, for each man and woman that has answered the call to serve you, to serve our nation, to serve our state, and even to serve one another. And even as we come to the end of this session, God, and we've had certainly contentious and passionate debates, Father, I just pray that we would leave this place tomorrow still friends, still standing shoulder to shoulder and fighting the good fight together, reminding us that we don't always have to see eye to eye to walk hand in hand. And God, we just will not fail to give you the honor and the praise and the glory for all that you've done and who you are. And Father, all of this we pray in the name that is above every name, the name of Jesus Christ. And everyone said, amen.
If all members and guests will remain standing, we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by the gentleman from the 79th District, Ed Hanson.
Please join me in honoring America. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Thursday, March 9th, 2023.
Gentleman to 51st, Douglas Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the year of our Lord, March 10, 2023, I hereby ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Are there objections? There are no objections. Introductions. Gentleman the 43rd, Douglas Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to announce the sponsor of the West Virginia Academy of Family Physicians and celebrating the 34th anniversary of the Doctor of the Day program. Our family doctor of the day is Carmen Rexroad from Franklin. Everyone, please give her a warm welcome.
Lady in the 49th, Douglas Tully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery, we are joined today by the 4th grade class from Scott Tays Elementary, including my great-nephew, Mr. Davis Tully, and his mother, Jennifer Tully. So if you will please make the 4th grade class welcome to our Capitol under the beautiful gold dome.
Gentleman the 12th, Douglas Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the South Gallery, we have a mother and son who are here to see the completion on the dyslexic bill. Would Missy Sims and her son Maxim stand, and everybody give them a round of applause.
Gentleman the 13th, Douglas Heckert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery, we have the Big Red Orchard. On behalf of the delegates from the Wood County, we welcome them here, and I'm going to read their names. When they please stand up. The head coach is Jim Parsons. The assistant coach is Jeremiah Parsons, Nathaniel Parsons, and Dan Hart. Seniors, Brandon Watson, Dax Chancellor. Juniors is Parker Crum, Lakin McLaughlin, and sophomores is Braden Brysley, and Chase Waybright.
I'm going to finish introducing the rest of them. The freshmen, Alan Bonner, Riley Lamp, Josh Steele, Phoenix Nesselrote, Hazel Statz, Skylar Hart, Chase Chancellor, Brennan Tingler, Eli Wolf, and Ty Hart. Great to see you guys down here. Everyone give them a warm welcome.
Gentleman from the 50th, Doug Pritt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. We have 2 pages with us this morning from Fayetteville Middle School. They are my students, 8th graders. We have Miss Kennedy Hobjohn, who's also Miss Teen Oakleaf for the Oakleaf Festival in Oak Hill, and Miss Chloe Nett, and they're escorted by their mothers, I'm assuming somewhere in the gallery, so I hope the House will please make them feel welcome. Thank you.
Lady from the 56th, Doug Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. I want to introduce a constituent and friend of mine in the West Gallery. I've got Jessica Hudson. She's the Executive Director for Dress for Success River Cities and Charleston, who are open their first location in Charleston this week. It's for people who need to get back to work to get clothing, and so it's a really great program. If everyone can make Jessica feel welcome.
Lady from the 63rd, Doug Dittman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm excited to introduce a page to you today. We have from Braxton County High School, Caden Perkins, and he is accompanied by his dad, Terry Perkins. Let's make him feel welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Gentleman of the 88th, Doug Hillenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Along with Delegate Howell, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Gracelyn Crow. If she'd stand, there we go. She's here from Franklin Middle School, all the way in Mineral County, and she's here with her dad, Jerry, and I don't see him, so he's not in the North Gallery. Oh, you can see him. Thank you.
Gentleman of the 43rd, Doug Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually have some pages with us today from Trap Hill Middle School. Our first one is Addison Petrie. She's getting ready to sit down. She'd stand back up, and her mother, Taylor, walk up, and her grandmother, Tonda Williams, is in the North Gallery. If they would stand up. Also, we have Ariana Combs and their parent, and her parent, Crystal and Eli Combs, and Lily Greathouse, and her mother, Susan Greathouse. If they would all stand in the house, give them a warm welcome.
Gentleman of the 42nd, Doug Steele.
Good morning. We have a few pages from my district, from Shady Spring Middle School. I guess they could also be from the gentleman from the 41st district, but Raleigh County altogether. I think we would all want to welcome, if you'll stand when I read your name, Elena Treadway and her mother Tammy Treadway, Brooke Amick and her mother Ashley Amick, Emma Pedri, who's here with Donna and Mike Pedri and sister Ella, and Kyle Millay, who's here with his father, Kevin Millay, if the House would make them feel welcome.
Other introductions at this time? We will pause again for introductions around 11 when guests would normally arrive. Other introductions at this time? If not, standing committee reports, select committee reports, executive messages.
House Bill 3340 has become law without the signature of the governor.
Message be received.
A communication from His Excellency the Governor advises that on March 9th, 2023, he approved committee substitute for House Bill 3042.
Message be received.
A communication from the Clerk of the Senate to the Governor advises that on March 9th, 2023, the following bills were presented to the Governor. Senate Bill 142, Senate Bill 237, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 335, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 439, Senate Bill 449, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 450, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 453, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 455, Senate Bill 458, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 475, Senate Bill 529, and Senate Bill 605.
Message will be received. Are there other executive messages? If not, Senate messages.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment Committee substitute for House Bill 2024 Budget Bill, making appropriations of public money out of the Treasury in accordance with Section 51, Article 6 of the Constitution.
The message will be received. Gentleman to the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment to the engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2024 represents a compromise between the House and the Senate's positions. The committee substitute for House Bill 2024 did not contemplate pay raises for state employees. With the passage of Senate Bill 268, the House agreed to the $2,300 pay raise for state employees. Those are reflected in this compromise. As we go through the bill, as I did last Saturday, we will refer to the item number and not the page number. The changes from the committee substitute to the compromise are as follows. Item 4, Supreme Court. In line 2, current expenses, the House took the Senate's position, increased the line from $21,063,451 to $21,482,914. Item 7, Civil Contingency Fund. In line 1, the House took the Senate's position and restored Milton flood wall to the front of the budget from the surplus section. In line 2, the Senate took the House's position in restoring local economic development assistance to $5 million. Item 29, Public Employees Insurance Agency. The committee substitute has moved $80 million to PEIA subsidy to position 1 in the surplus section, but the compromise restored it to this item in the amount of $71,373,750. Item 30, Prosecuting Attorneys Institute. The amendment increases line 1, forensic medical examinations, from $143,697 to $568,607 to improve access for rape kits. In item 35, Division of Natural Resources, line 5. Current expenses were reduced by $54,000. The change made in House Bill 3299 to DNR officers' retirement provisions won't have the fiscal impact for which we had accounted for. In item 42, Department of Economic Development, the House took the Senate's position and added a new line of appropriation for Marshall University Research Corporation for $500,000. This will facilitate a grant writing program. The amendment also includes $15 million direct transfer for the Water Development Authority. This money goes for the use of water and sewer infrastructure projects around the state. Item 44, Department of Education. The governor's adjustment letter requested a reduction in line 4, teachers' retirement savings, realizing in the amount of $16,104,000. Item 46, state aid to schools. The governor's adjustment letter changed the entirety of the state aid to schools due to the passage of the $2,300 pay raise. Certified property evaluations and actuarial requirements from the Retirement Board. While the local share increased, the retirement assistance contributions decreased. The total amount of the item increased by $89,417,825. This is largely due to the pay raises. The total appropriation for school aid in the school aid formula is $1,888,192,000 $198,090. Item 47, School Building Authority. The compromise increased general revenue appropriation to the School Building Authority to $36 million. Item 50, Division of Cultural and History. The House took the Senate's position on line 11 for educational enhancements, reducing that line back to the governor's introduced appropriation of $73,500. Item 57, Division of Health, Central Office. The governor's request an additional $1,630,649 for the chief medical examiner, and the compromise reflects that increase. Item 58, Consolidated Medical Services Fund. There are a number of changes to this item. The House agreed to the Senate's position, reducing item 58 by $152 million. The $152 million has been spread across 10 new items, reflecting the creation of House Bill 2006 of the Department of Health Facilities. Those 10 items are for the Central Office, the Health Facilities Capital Projects Fund, and the 8 state hospitals. The amendment also increases item 58, line 4, institutional facilities operations by $12,031,796 to provide additional funds for contract nurses at state hospitals. The House has also taken the Senate's position on a $150,000 pilot program in Senate Bill 147. Item 61, Division of Human Services. The Senate took the House position and restored the medical services and social services line to this item from the back of the budget. The Senate also agreed to the improvements from House Bill 2002. Item 78, West Virginia State Police. The appropriation for the retirement system's unfunded liability was reduced by $26,000. This was in the governor's adjustment letter and reflects the retirement board's actuarial analysis. Item 89, Division of Multimodal Transportation Facilities, Public Transit. The governor requested an additional $200,000 for current expenses. This will address the funding for the Potomac Highlands Airport Authority operating expenses. Item 90, Division of Multimodal Transportation Facilities. This is a new item requesting an adjustment letter to address the creation of by the division by the House Bill 4492 during last year's session. The division oversees the State Rail, the Office of Public Transit, and the Aeronautics Commission. The total for this new item was $1,457,500. Item 92, Department of Veterans Assistance. The adjustment letter requested $1,500,000 direct transfer to the Veterans Facility Support Fund. This will replenish the fund used for contract nurses at the Veterans Nursing Home. Item 95, Community and Technical College Education Control Account. Since the Senate has taken up House Bill 3417, which added Potomac State to the Learn and Earn program, they did not take up House Bill 3417, which would have added Potomac State to the Learn and Earn program. The line for community college workforce development has been reduced by $310,000. Item 105, Higher Education Policy Commission, Control Account. The Senate has taken a House position on the new line for the dual enrollment program created by the House Bill 2005. The Senate has not taken up House Bill 3192, which would have abolished the Center for Nursing and transfer its duties to the HEPC. So the line from the committee substitute for nursing scholarships and workforce transfer has been removed, as their source for funding is no longer necessary. Item 107, West Virginia University General Administrative Fund. Item 109, Marshall University General Admission Funds have their both respective lines for state priority. Brownfield Professional Development increased by $500,000 in each line. These programs provide vital grant writing assistance for West Virginia brownfield areas. The committee substitute also creates a new line in item 107 for West Virginia University, land grant match. This is in accordance with House Bill 3371 and is only a realignment of funds, not new spending. Item 119, Adjutant General State Militia. The National Guard has informed us that they will be able to absorb the cost of the bills passed this session, and so the military authority line has been reduced by $827,500. The total amount of appropriation, state fund, general revenue is $4,874,559,658. The governor's introduced budget was $4,883,768,346. We are $9,208,688 below the introduced budget. The total spending authority for the state road fund this year will be $1,697,782,874. The total amount of spending authority in the special revenue accounts is $2,071,416,872. Section 4, lottery net profits include expenditures totaling $144,077,498. Section 5, excess lottery includes expenditures of $334,670,790. Federal funds that are included in the spending authority is $9,443,163,508. The federal block grants include spending authority of $831,899,732. General revenue surplus. The first item for the Division of Natural Resources. This item was in the governor's introduced budget and provides $52 million for the capital outlay repairs and equipment surplus, $900,000 for current expenses. This money will go towards much needed improvements in our state park system, including repairs of the trams at Hawk's Nest and Pipestem. The second item is $10 million to the Department of Transportation to extend and maintenance on orphan roads around the state. You're welcome, gentlemen from the second. Next in the appropriation is $15 million for the Department of Tourism. The department is expanding its brand promotion into new markets, such as New York City, Philadelphia, and Detroit. The appropriation for the industrial development will fund a new state-owned trail development fund, which will expand outdoor tourism opportunities throughout the state of West Virginia. Next in the appropriation is $282 million to provide matching funds for federal funds and grants for the deferred maintenance of our colleges, our community and technical schools, and correction units. The committee substitute has individual items for each of the community colleges and four-year colleges. After a series of discussions, we believe it's possible to draw down some federal infrastructure investment and Jobs Act money to stretch out our deferred maintenance dollars even further. $209 million of that was appropriated for the colleges and $73 million for our correctional facilities. The next item in the section is $2.2 million for the the Department of Arts, Cultural, and History for current expenses. This appropriation was in the introduced bill. The surplus section also appropriates $40 million to School Building Authority, which will be transferred into the School Construction Fund. The next item is a $20 million appropriation to HEPC for nursing program expansion support. This program is working to alleviate our state's nursing shortage by training new nurses. Next is an appropriation for the State Board of Education Vocational Division for Jobs and Hope, a surplus of $1.6 billion, which was in the introduced bill. The next appropriation is a direct transfer of $38 million into Economic Development Office of the Secretary. This money will be transferred for the Water Development Authority. The Senate has agreed to the $5 million appropriation to the Division of General Services, which will provide funding for the restoration of the Holly Grove Mansion on the Capitol Grounds complex. The appropriation for economic development has 4 lines. The first line is a current expenses of $500,000. The second line is for the West Virginia Land Stewardship Corporation surplus in the amount of $1.5 million. The third line is a direct transfer in the amount of $35 million. This is a directive language transferring this appropriation to the EDA Credit Insurance Fund. The fourth line is for $200,000 for the back roads to Appalachia. All these items, all these are for smaller scale economic development projects around the state. The next appropriation is $500,000 to the Governor's Civil Contingent Fund. The next item is the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Secretary for $800,000 for current expenses. This was in the committee's substitute and is to support interstate anti-narcotics initiative. The next appropriation is for the Adjutant General, State Militia. The House Committee substitute included the Armory Transfer Board for a line of $3,318,000 to maximize their federal match. The amendment takes the Senate's position and adds a line for the Civil Air Patrol of $1.4 million. This will allow the Civil Air Patrol to perform much-needed repairs to their facilities and add midnight lights to their planes. Next appropriation is to the Division of Health, Central Office, direct transfer of $10 million. These monies will be transferred to the Emergency Medical Services Salary Enhancement Fund. The next appropriation is to the Department of Commerce, Office Secretary, for the program called Jobs for West Virginia Graduates. This program helps disadvantaged West Virginians to find employment opportunities. The next appropriation is to the Division of Multimodal Transportation Facilities, Aeronautics Division for current expenses, surplus of $1 million. This was in the committee's substitute. The next appropriation is for the Division of Health, Central Office for current expenses for $2 million. There is a directive language stating that this shall be used for the Hardy County Department of Health. The next appropriation is for the Department of Administration, Office of the Secretary for direct transfer, surplus of $500,000. There is a directive language transferring this to the Chief Technology Office Administration Fund. The Office of Technology has requested these funds to facilitate the creation of an in-house record center as the state seeks to transition away from outside record storage. The next appropriation is $500,000 for the West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind for fire protection. The next item consists of $400 million transferred to the Personal Income Reserve Fund to provide a buffer for the tax reduction in House Bill 2526. The next item is for the Division of General Services Consolidated State Laboratory in the surplus for $125 million. The next appropriation is $29 million for the School of Osteopath Medicine. This is a committee substitute which will allow the school to complete a new lab facility. There is a $50 million appropriation in the next item for West Virginia University, which will match for the school to obtain a National Cancer Institute designation. The next item for the Division of Cultural History for Education Enhancement for $500,000. And there's directive language stating that this is here for the Save the Children. You may remember that the committee substitute that this was in line item 50 in the front of the budget and now has been moved to the back. The next item, excuse me. The next item is for the introduced budget bill from the governor's office for the Posey Perry Emergency Food Bank Fund surplus for $10 million. Finally, as for the introduced budget, is an appropriation for the State Department of Education for Communities and Schools in surplus for $5 million. The total amount in Section 9 in the General Revenue surplus accrued to $1,165,478,000. The introduced budget was $1,382,878,000. That we spent less than the introduced by $217,400,000. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that we concur in this Senate amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendments. Is there discussion on the motion? Gentleman 98, Douglas Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the goal of trying to maximize how much federal funding we receive by combining the deferred maintenance funding for our state colleges and community colleges. Is the intent still to ensure that each of those community colleges and our four-year colleges, universities, receive funding along the lines of what we had proposed in our initial budget?
Yes, sir. With discussions with the Senate and the language that we put in the line and talking with the governor's office and the budget director, we made our intentions known and they agreed. There was a possibility because of the federal funds coming down that there may be some monies there for that. They're not real sure. They do think that there may be federal money drawdown for the jails within that same line. But the intent of our $1 million for each of the CTCs and somewhere in the neighborhood of the $20 million for each of the four-year facilities was the intent, and everybody agreed to that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman 20, Douglas Foster is recognized.
Thank you. Will the chairman yield? So I'm trying to follow along, go through the budget. What we're looking at is SFA TAR 3-5, correct? SFA TAR 3-5 for the Senate amendment. Is that the one we're looking at?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I just wanted to see, first, since the gentleman brought up the point talking about the federal grant funds match in, I guess it's item 401, the Governor's Civil Contingency Fund. It's $282 million.
Hold on a second. The $282 million is for the deferred the maintenance that we have for the colleges and for the correctional units.
So, and this is a federal matching funds grant?
No, these are surplus dollars. What we were trying to define was that these dollars may be able to draw down or backfill from some federal funds in the new Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA. And they're researching that now, but obviously we don't know for sure at this point because of our timing if there's going to be any federal funds available for the colleges. It seemed more in the quick definitions, it looked like the correctional units may be able to optimize some of that money.
And that's what I'm getting at is, like, I know our deferred maintenance, our issues with our jails and prisons have been estimated somewhere around $142 million, correct?
Right. And we've got $73 million in this appropriation for that.
Plus this 282, but that can only be used to draw down on federal funds if they're there, correct, or no?
No, this money is to be used if there's available federal funds, then they'll be able to draw down. But we wanted to make the language available so that they could use this money immediately after July 1 to start to work on the corrections and on the colleges. And they're working on trying to find out if there's federal funds available to match that.
So
but these are state dollars, this
yeah,
208.
I'm aware because it's in section
Okay.
9. It's the surplus section. So if there's surplus left over, then these could be used. Could this money be used if there was no jails or prisons, federal fund matching? Could these general revenue dollars after July 1 of 2024, could they be used to repair our jails and prisons without any federal match?
Yes.
Okay. And that's where my question kind of comes, is because we put them both all into one, why is this not two separate sections, one being for jails and one being for the colleges?
This is how it came to us. And between us and the Senate, we agreed to leave it this way.
And let's say the money, the federal funds matching was available for the colleges to eat up this entire $280 million. Could
No.
that be done without any money going to the jails and prisons?
No, that's not it. That was not the intent, and that's not the agreed upon agreement with the governor's office and the Senate. That we're only looking at $209 million for the colleges and the CTCs, and the other $73 million would be available to go to the corrections units.
And that's my concern, is that 73 wasn't in a separate line item. Why was that not done?
That's what we agreed upon doing.
All right, and then another question is dealing with the total. You went through total numbers there, and you said it was our general revenue spend was right around $4.8 billion.
Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah. Our number is $4,874.5 million. And the governor's introduced budget was $4,880, almost $884 million. So we were $9.2 million less than the introduced budget.
Okay, and that's the introduced budget. How did it compare to last year's budget? What was the general revenue spend from last year?
Hold on a second. For last year's, this would be the current budget, right? Yeah, FY23 was $4,635,000,000.
So we've increased the general revenue spend by $200 million in this budget based off of last year.
Yes, sir. Roughly $240 million.
And your section 9, your surplus revenue appropriations is just under $1.2 billion. $1,165,000,000. So our total appropriation spend, including Section 1 and Section 9, so what we've appropriated money to is just over $6 billion. So it's not.
That's correct. Along with the federal grants and the federal, hold on. Yeah, the drawdown on federal fund spending will be $9,443,000,000 and $832 million in round numbers of federal block grant money. So there will be roughly $10,200,000,000 and almost $300 million coming from the federal government.
Okay, and now to back. So we have significantly, I mean, our expenditure is over $6 billion that
Yes,
we've
sir.
appropriated in this budget.
Could be. We're authorizing the spending. That doesn't mean they necessarily will spend it.
And only $400 million of that is for the income tax reserve fund, correct?
Correct.
And that's if it's available.
It is available. That's excess revenue, current excess revenues that will be set aside July, well, after the quote-unquote 13th month, then those dollars will be set aside in the reserve fund.
So that's in the reserve fund out of July 2024 is in this budget.
No,
right?
it'll come out of this current year's surplus.
Okay, I see it here now. And that's one of my questions is, so what's our expected revenue so there's Section 9, our expected surplus revenue right now for this budget, this upcoming budget year?
All right, based upon the projections that we have, all right, in the revenue surplus section, we are at 1.165. If you take 400 million of that out for the PIT, that leaves you roughly $765 million in the surplus section. And then you take out the 282 for the schools and the corrections, then you can see the numbers come down pretty quick.
Yeah, and I understand that. I'm concerned with the fact that the income tax, all the cuts we did was somewhere around $700 million, correct? The tax cuts.
Yeah, but that's a stair-stepped in. If you remember, we're only going to take up 22.5% of the income tax reduction in this current calendar year, which only half of that would be entitled to the fiscal year that we're talking about in this budget. Then only half of the car tax or the inventory and property tax would be in this budget, because it wouldn't be implemented until the second, implemented next year.
And is that $400 million enough to cover it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Gentleman, the 22nd, Doug Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman continue to yield?
Yes.
Thank you. I've been looking forward in here, and I recall in our budget hearings that DHHR had testified that the Office of the Inspector General overall makes up 0.2 or 0.22% of their budget. Could you point me to which item of appropriation that is in the budget?
Just a second. Delegate, we're still trying to look for it. Is there a particular question you had about it?
Yes, well,
I apologize. We're searching every account right
Well,
now.
that's all right, because I was asking that because I was looking for it in here as well and couldn't find it. But DHHR testified during their budget hearing that the OIG roughly gets about $17 million a year. I was trying to find where that was, and basically to see if there was any modification. I'd worked with your staff over the past few days, perhaps seeking to realign some of the dollars in DHHR for the Office of Inspector General.
And the other thing that we did too, and I think we may have explained this in committee, the Senate had jumped out in the front on distributing dollars because half the year we're going to be in the same position we are with the HHR until December, and then with the split up there will be 3 separate new departments that will have to account for their accounting. And right now, because of the way that we're going to do that in the second half, some of this stuff has to get moved around until next year, and we sit down here and talk about a separate 3 separate divisions or 3 separate departments under 3 separate secretaries. And I apologize that we can't seem to find the answer for you.
No apology necessary, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your work actually on trying to split these line items out a little bit more as we do this for DHHR.
They just explained to me it's not in the current expense line.
Okay, so the question I would have then is, if it's not in any of the...
excuse me, it is in the current expense line.
Okay, so it's in current expense line, and the current secretary has the ability to dedicate as much money to OIG as the secretary would choose.
That's correct, since it's in that current expense line.
It's kind of in a blanket appropriation line.
Correct.
So basically, the first question then, and I've been working with your staff, would you please commit to working with us to try to get more dollars to the Office of Inspector General, because I think 0.11%.
And again, this is
laughable.
like we talked about when we did the split up, that this won't be the first time we look at this. We will get reports. The Joint Committee is supposed to have reports throughout the interims before next year. We will also have the ability to look at their dollars and to see where we misappropriated from one department to a different one, because our big goal is to not miss or misappropriate any federal dollars as we do the split up.
Got it. And last question, perhaps on a little bit of a different vein. Has there been any directive language changes? I know obviously that you went over many of the modifications, but for those not familiar with the budget, right, we put dollars into line items, and then there's directive language at the end of those appropriations. From the bill that we sent over to the Senate, less any of the major changes there that you laid out in your description, has there been any directive language changes throughout the budget? And if so, that's before us. And if so, what are those?
Probably the only one was probably to do with what the Delegate Foster was asking me about as far as the colleges were concerned, because we had taken a position to try to lay out a defined amount of monies to go to the colleges and for the correctional units to come up with the money. And as the delegate had alluded to, we've got $100+ million worth of expenses for the jails, and we're setting aside $73 million of that, hoping that we can get into the IIJA with some additional dollars, but not to hamper those dollars, so they can get to work as soon as this construction season allows us and the dollars allow us, that we can get in there and start doing this work at the colleges and the jails. But that's why we decided to move it to the governor's office instead of leaving it as an item in the back of the budget.
Sure. My point on that, there's no new, like, here's $50,000 directed for this project or $100,000 directed for that project.
It's like when you go to conference, the items before you and each of the bills are the ones you have to deal with.
Right.
This compromise was the same way. The back of the budget items that were in the Senate's back of the budget and our back of the budget were the only items we talked about.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank
Yes,
you, Mr.
sir.
Speaker.
Gentleman from the 52nd row.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the gentleman would answer some questions for us.
Surely, to my friend.
First of all, I congratulate you on your negotiations with the Senate. That's not easy done, and I think you've done a good job for us. My first question is really related to the deferred maintenance and construction costs that we have for the universities. Our budget originally had, I think it was $20 million for the colleges. Now we have a pool of money, $209 million, that
Yes,
would
sir.
include CTCs as well as the four-year schools, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and this, it was my understanding that this might allow us some ability to get federal match money for some of these construction costs. Will that pool allow that?
Yeah, that was the Senate's position, that they had done some research with the governor's office, and that there might be through that IIJA program at the federal level, that there may be some dollars available for universities and colleges, but there may be additional dollars available for the correctional units. And so the reason that we combined the two, to continue to combine the two, was so that the governor has an opportunity to see if they can do some drawdown. And we know that's been pretty successful in our other programs, and the lady that's in charge in the governor's office is doing a phenomenal job of drawing these dollars down. And so it was my thought to give in on that position, so that if we have an opportunity to draw some money down, but I was concerned that the language was such that I wanted to make sure that these dollars were going to be able to get out in July, so that we can get to work on the much needed items. And I know you have concerns up the road here at State, and I have concerns, in other places across the state. But that we get those dollars out and get those colleges, especially the small colleges.
Yes.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for places like Glenville and Shepherd and Concord and the other publicly small colleges to have an influx of dollars for these older facilities to be able to get remodeled, repurposed in such a way that now there'll be at least another generation down the road of kids that will be able to take advantage of these modern facilities.
Now, the money is somewhat pulled, but we're guaranteed to have, was it $79 million for corrections?
73 million, I think.
73, sorry. And you mentioned jails as well as prisons, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, all correctional units. We're supposed to be in that.
All right. I had a question also on the land grant match that was an added line to WU's budget, but I think that's an existing line in the state budget, but it was increased to be a full match, correct?
Yes, sir. The $400,000.
Thank you. Now, there's a $10 million appropriation to Posey Perry, and I think that's a food bank.
That is correct. If you remember the State of the State address, the governor addressed, an acquaintance or a relative of his named Posey Perry, that he worked at the food bank, and I believe it was in Raleigh County, and he would like for us to be able to make sure that we've got some additional funds set aside for food for hungry West Virginians.
And that was $10 million, correct?
Yes, sir. And that was in his budget, and it is in the supplemental section of this budget.
Okay, in the back of the budget.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, what about the state laboratory? It looks like we're appropriating $125 million for a combined state laboratory that would serve the state police and agriculture and different departments.
That's right. The original estimate was $250 million. The governor suggested that we take $125 million this year, and then set aside, and then if the numbers look good for next year, be able to set another $125 million aside for that next year's appropriation.
All right, so we really need the $250 million to build the lab.
Yes, sir.
Okay, has there any decision been made about the location of such a lab?
No, not to my knowledge.
Yeah. Was there an appropriation for fairs and festivals? I think we identified a number of festivals that would be funded a certain amount. How does the budget deal with it now?
Yeah, that is in the cultural, it is in the lottery section or excess lottery? It is in the lottery section, and the total dollar amount is no change from last year.
Okay.
And it may be reappropriate, as you and I have discussed before. some of the fairs and festivals that have stopped in certain counties, and some of the other ones, then the total dollar amount has not changed, but may have been reappropriated within those counties.
And those are enumerated in the back of the budget still?
Yeah.
I think we had those enumerated.
And they are in Section 4.
Very good.
In the lottery section, in the budget.
Now, what about staff salaries? Help me, I'm not sure. The government included some bump in his flat budget for salaries, but I think...
Yeah, if you remember, he proposed a 5% budget, or a 5% pay increase within his budget. When we got the budget, we did not take up the 5% pay raise. So our staff removed from personal services 5%. As you remember, I went through last Saturday about the adjustments that we did towards the 5%. Yeah. We did not have at that time the $2,300 pay raise that we passed earlier this week. So when we sat down to talk about this compromise, the $2,300 got added back in where we took out the 5% and put that into the system.
As a single dollar amount rather than a percentage?
Correct.
Okay, but now what about salaries that are not paid by general revenue?
Obviously, he'll have to authorize the ones in special revenue, and then as far as the ones that are outside of the scope of the state government, that'll be up to those individual government entities.
Now, it's my understanding that none of the colleges or CTCs got pay raises included in their grants. Is that right?
Colleges, did pay raises go through on the colleges? For the general revenue portion, it would have.
They did get the general revenue.
In the general revenue, they would have.
I didn't realize that. I think you said that there was that federal funds that we had 9.4 and then 0.8 billion for block grants, federal block grants, and that totals, I think, around $10.2 billion from the federal government in our budget. Is that number right, or did I get it?
Let me look here.
Okay.
It was 9.443 and 0.831, so you're looking at almost 10.3 billion in federal monies coming down in some form or fashion as spending authority and block grants.
So about what percentage of the state budget is federally funded? Is it 2/3?
I'd say you're pretty close.
All right. Thank you. And thank you very much. Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Gentleman 54th, Dr. Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir.
Continue to yield. I believe it's item 27. I think I'm right. The Senate gave an increase to the pay for a public defender's office. Public defenders, did that stay in?
Yes, sir, it did.
So they're getting a raise. Okay.
It's item 30, I think. Although that's the Institute.
Is it item 27?
Item 27 stayed the same. There was no change. There was no change between what was introduced. Excuse me. Oh, that's
It was
right.
increased.
Yeah, if you remember, as I said to the other gentleman from Kanawha, we had taken the 5% out because we didn't take it up.
Okay.
Then the $2,300 got put back into the compromise, so it's got the pay raises in the.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, and it does include the pay raises for the Public Defenders Corporation.
Great. Thank you.
All right, sir.
Gentleman 45th, Doug Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman, yield.
Yes, sir.
The laboratories appears to be a two-tripper, as we like to say, this year and next year on the laboratory that we're looking at building. Would you generally get the feeling that would be the same thing on the repairs for the corrections facilities as well, kind of looking at a two-tripper?
Well, we don't know that for sure because we don't know how many federal dollars can be drawn down through the $73 million that we've got set aside for them at this point. Plus, there was other dollars in the upfront of the budget that went to them to pay for locks and that type of thing. So there's some of the items that the gentleman, that Delegate Foster brought up from the 20th, that we may have exceeded over half of those needs just between what we had in the front of the budget and what we appropriate in the back. But we're hoping, again, as I said earlier, we're hoping that the lady that's working with the federal funds in the governor's office is going to be able to help us find some dollars for the correctional units with that $73 million that we've set aside.
So there's a real possibility the $73 million may actually grow with federal dollars kicked in.
Yeah, I wouldn't get my hopes up, but the opportunity is out there for them to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Speaker.
Is there other debate on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment on committee substitute for House Bill 2024? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the motion adopted. The question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Gentleman 99th, your vote's not registered. Delegate Clark. Gentleman 69th, Delegate Marple, your vote's not registered. Has every member voted? Gentleman from the 46th, Delegate Honaker, your vote's not registered. Clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 91 ayes, 6 nays, and 3 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2024 Budget Bill, making appropriations of public money out of the Treasury in accordance with Section 51, Article 6 of the Constitution.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Gentleman 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill take effect from its passage.
The question is on the gentleman's motion that the bill take effect from passage. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. Clerk will please record the gentleman of 17th, Delegate Pinson, as having voted in the affirmative. On this question, there were 93 ayes, 3 nays, and 4 members absent, 2/3 of members having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2004, prevent the use of payment card processing systems for surveillance of Second Amendment activity and discriminatory conduct.
The message will be received. Gentleman 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment makes the following changes to House Bill 2004. First, it provides a financial institution with a right to cure a violation prior to the aggrieved party bringing a civil action. Number 2, it authorizes the Attorney General to investigate and bring a claim for injunctive relief with a provision for attorney's fees. Number 3, it gives the Commissioner on Banking the ability to administer the requirements of the Act. And number 4, it clarifies that it is not a violation of the Act for a financial institution to disclose that it is not in possession of the protected financial information and to provide the identity of the entity that is in possession of the protected financial information. The Senate amendment made other technical changes to bring the remainder of the bill into compliance with the changes. And finally, the title was amended to reflect the revisions. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with the Senate amendment and title amendment.
The question is on the gentleman's motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment on committee substitute for House Bill 2004. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares that motion adopted. Question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 98 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2004, prevent the use of payment card processing systems for surveillance of Second Amendment activity and discriminatory conduct.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on Senate messages.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment. Committee substitute for House Bill 2016 relating to confidential child care records.
Message to be received. Gentleman 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2016, the Senate amendment moved provisions of the House bill to other code sections in clarified language. The amendment does not affect the intent of the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with the Senate amendment.
The question is on the gentleman's motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of the adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 96 ayes, 0 nays, and 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2016 relating to confidential child care records.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment. Committee substitute for House Bill 2540, Travel Insurance Model Act.
The message to be received. Gentleman the 8th.
Everybody, the purpose of the bill is to establish the Travel Insurance Model Act, set requirements for policies, allow rulemaking and enforcement for the Commissioner, setting standards for policies and pricing. The Senate Banking and Insurance Strike and Insert Amendment includes various technical changes or technical corrections and improvements, including as to the capitalization, proper designation of levels of division in the bill, legal citations, and the use of standard language concerning rulemaking. The amendment also clarifies that the license fee remains at $200, reference both premium and tax citations, uses the NAIC model as to 8(e), which is substantively the same but more readable, omits 13 concerning the effective date, given that the effective date of the bill was already 90 days from passage. The Senate Banking and Insurance Title Amendment makes technical corrections, includes references to license fee, and removes reference to 13. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur in the Senate Amendment and Title Amendment with further amendment.
The question is on the gentleman's motion that the House concur in the Senate Amendment and Title Amendment with further amendment on committee substitute for House Bill 2540. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 97 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2540, Travel Insurance Model Act.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
Committee substitute for House... the clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment. Committee substitute for House Bill 2621 relating generally to bail bondsmen.
The message to be received. Gentleman from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to require the Insurance Commissioner to formulate testing and continuing education requirements for all applicants and license renewals for professional bondsmen in criminal cases. The bill also provides a definition of approved securities and amend the definition of bondsman. As opposed to the House version, the bill as amended by the Senate delays the sunset date for the use of real estate to direct security by new bail bondsmen. The amendment does away with the continuing education requirement and limits testing to initial license applicants. It also makes technical corrections. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur in the Senate amendment and the Senate title amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment on committee substitute for House Bill 2621. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares that motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2621 relating generally to bail bondsmen.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Next Senate message.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2814 to create a hydrogen power task force.
Message to be received. Lady from 71st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. The purpose of this bill is to create a hydrogen power task force to study hydrogen as an energy source and report to the executive and legislature. The Senate amendment adds 2 more members to the task force, the Secretary of Commerce or designee, and a representative from higher education. The amendment strengthens the bill and the task force. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with the Senate amendment.
The question is on the lady's motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment to committee substitute for House Bill 2814. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of the adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 89 ayes, 10 nays, and 1 member absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2814 to create hydrogen power task force.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment House Bill 2875, clarifying that circuit court judges have the ability/authority to waive the requirement that a party pass a home study performed by the DHHR.
The message should be received. Lady from 71st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to allow circuit judges to waive the requirement of a home study when DHHR wishes to place a child with his or her grandparents for adoption. The Senate amendment makes technical changes which do not affect the intent of the House bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with the Senate amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendments on House Bill 2875. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There were 99 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 member absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2875, clarifying that circuit court judges have the ability/authority to waive the requirement that a party pass a home study performed by the DHHR.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 3189, the PFAS Protection Act.
The message will be received. Gentleman 61st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The PFAS Protection Act requires DEP and private parties to study and collect data about PFAS substances in public water sources and permitted discharges. The Senate amendment clarifies that action plans and studies by DEP may not change the duties and standards of the public water systems. It also adds a requirement that future state water quality criteria cannot be more stringent than U.S. EPA standards. The amendment clarifies certain duties and does not harm the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move the House concur with the Senate amendment and title amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment on committee substitute for House Bill 3189. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Gentleman to the 51st, your vote's not registered. Delegate Fast. Clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 91 ayes, 8 nays, and 1 member absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3189, the PFAS Protection Act.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment, committee substitute for House Bill 3214 to create the Road Optimization and Assessment Data Pilot Project.
The message will be received. Gentleman from the 61st.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to create the Road Optimization and Assessment Data Road Pilot Project. The Senate amendment makes numerous non-substantive changes in the organization of the bill, in the findings, in the numbering, and in the arrangement of the provisions of the bill. The only substantive changes of any note is the removal of the requirement that all paved roads in the pilot counties be driven and assessed in conjunction with the program. While this is an undesirable change, it does not destroy the central intent of the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with the Senate amendment and title amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment on committee substitute for House Bill 3214. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 94 ayes, 5 nays, and 1 member absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3214 to create the Road Optimization and Assessment Data Pilot Project.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment committee substitute for House Bill 3265, remove statutory mandates that the sheriff of a county shall serve process or is responsible for cost of service or arrest by another law enforcement agency.
The message will be received. Gentleman 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment clarifies language but did not affect the intent of the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with the Senate amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment on House Bill 3265. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 98 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3265, remove statutory mandates that the sheriff of a county shall serve process or is responsible for cost of service or arrest by another law enforcement agency.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment House Bill 3499 to permit joint tenancy with rights of survivorship when transfer on death deeds specify a joint tenancy with right of survivorship.
The message to be received, Gentleman 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the Senate amendment adds revocation language which does not conflict with the House bill. The amendment also states that this affects transfer upon death deeds recorded after the effective date. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with the Senate amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment on House Bill 3499. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Let even the 56th, your vote's not registered. Clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 97 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3499 to permit joint tenancy with rights of survivorship when transfer on death deeds specify a joint tenancy with right of survivorship.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment House Bill 3500, allowing consumer lenders to permit employees to conduct certain business at locations other than the licensee's designated office.
The message should be received. Gentleman 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate Strike and Insert Amendment more closely conforms the language of the section to the intent of the bill. The amendment includes more consumer safeguards which were discussed with the Division of Financial Institutions. Specifically, it allows employees to work at their residence, provided it is within 100 miles from the licensed location, and it clarifies that at-home activities would be considered reported and regulated as taking place at the location of the licensee. This language helps ensure ease of regulatory oversight and enforcement. It also adds data security and privacy safeguards. It adds a requirement for risk-based monitoring and oversight processes of work performed by the employees of a licensee at other location. It not only requires training, but the conversations involving consumers are kept confidential. It requires that the other location is safe and secure workplace for employees. It requires the licensee to have written policy and procedures to ensure compliance with the requirements of remote work. And lastly, it requires licensees to review and document compliance and certify such compliance annually to the Commissioner. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur in the Senate amendment and the Senate title amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment on House Bill 3500. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 96 ayes, 0 nays, and 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3500, allowing consumer lenders to permit employees to conduct certain business at locations other than the licensee's designated office.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has adopted Senate Concurrent Resolution 24, renaming Mount Olive Correctional Complex and Jail as Mike V. Coleman Maximum Security Complex.
The message will be received and the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules. Are there further Senate messages at this time? If not, resolutions.
House Resolution 18.
Gentleman from 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the Chamber automation system.
The gentleman from 96th asked unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the Chamber automation system. Are there objections? There are no objections heard. Petitions, bills introduced, motions, unfinished business, bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 47, creating Charter Schools Stimulus Fund.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman of the 38th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would create a special revenue fund known as the Charter Schools Stimulus Fund to provide financial support to charter schools for startup costs such as costs associated with renovating or remodeling existing buildings and structures, and also costs for the purchase of school buses. It will consist of legislative appropriation, grants, gifts, devices, and donations. The fund will be administered by the West Virginia Professional Charter School Board under rules promulgated by the State Board. The rule must include an application requirement and notification by a charter school board to potential applicants. An applicant must attest that it would not otherwise have the financial capacity to successfully apply to an authorizer or start a public charter school, and 2, is not working with or financed by any organization that has started or financed other charter schools to the degree that facilitating and starting charter schools is a significant portion of the organization's purpose. A qualifying charter school applicant would receive, 1, an initial grant of up to $300,000 during or before the first year of operation. If the applicant fails to begin operating a charter school within 30 months, the applicant must reimburse the board for the grant plus interest at a prorated rate of 10% per year. The board may lengthen the time period in extenuating circumstances. And 2, charter schools that receive the initial grant also may apply for an additional grant of up to $100,000. If it fails to begin operating the charter school within the next 30 months, the additional grant must also be repaid under the same terms with the same extension allowance for extenuating circumstances. Of note, there are currently 4 charter schools. 2 of them are virtual, and there are 2 more that are approved, and we are allowed up to 10 total at this time. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 50th, Doug Pritz, recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I tell you, we've resurrected more bills we've killed in Education Committee than our Lord resurrected in Scripture, dead people in Scripture. We killed this bill in committee, and it came back again the next day, back to life. And it was testified to us in committee that the 2 physical charter schools that we have in the state are struggling and failing. And so this is essentially a revolving slush fund for them to continue to dip into money year after year after year, potentially. And this fund, private and public monies, will mix in this fund. If they need the money for things that were not planned for initially, why do they not just ask for a one-time appropriation? Why do we have to set up a fund that we have to continually inject money into every year? We have a school system that is struggling. I don't understand why we've set up a parallel system that also, per statement in committee, is also struggling. I don't understand. I urge a no vote on this bill, and I hope that you please consider the points I've made. Thank you.
Gentleman 27th, Dr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been proposals repeatedly made by several of us to improve the safety of our schools. And there's a plan, supposedly. But there are needs all over this state right now for safety in our public schools. And so what are we doing? We're appropriating money to non-public schools. I just don't understand why, with our surplus, we can't realize how important it is to put man traps, fix doors, windows in our public schools, and keep our teachers and our students safe. So I urge a no vote.
The gentleman from the 99th, Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, this year in education we had a few bills die and get resurrected, and I stand behind resurrecting those. And this was one of them that we did. I want to clarify some information. So, 1, these are public schools. They're public charter schools. Number 2, this is not a revolving fund. This is a startup fund. One of the things we did back in 2021, we forgot to do, was help these schools actually open, giving them some sort of a fund so they can open. One of the schools is unable to buy a school bus because the amount of transportation money they get is only $60,000. That pretty much covers a bus driver, so they're not able to purchase their own school buses. And the county where it's at doesn't have enough school bus drivers to pick up the kids. So when the school actually opened, they had almost 500 kids, and they lost 200 because they weren't able to provide transportation. So this fund helps these schools that we want. We want 10 of them. We want them to be functional in the state. This gives them an opportunity to make a claim for a grant so they can assist in opening up their school. All right. So this is very important bill. Like the chairman of education said, we have 4 current right now. We're only allowed 10, so it's not like this is going to just keep on going. This is for setup and startup of these. So I urge passage of the bill. Thank you.
Gentleman, 52nd, Dr. Rose, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the chairman respond to a question?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about the virtual schools. Do they need startup money? I mean, they don't have a building to maintain.
I don't believe that they've requested any. They would be included in the Safe Schools funds that we approved earlier.
Yes.
So that might be for cybersecurity or whatever, but not for this purpose.
Okay. So the virtual public charter schools would not qualify for these funds?
No, they could qualify. They have to show reason for it, but I don't think they probably had that need.
Who would grant the funds?
It would go to the Charter School Board. They would have authority to disperse any of those funds from the fund.
Okay. Would we make an automatic transfer to the fund before the Charter School Board would make a decision?
I would believe it would, from talking with the finance chair, would be a supplemental that we would have to appropriate.
In other words, this bill does not appropriate any funds or add any funds to the...
Not at this time, but it can accept any gifts, donations, or other sources. That's it.
Thank you, sir.
Gentleman 98, Token Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the legislation. Pleased to have one of our state's 2 charter schools in my district. And contrary to claims to the contrary, students there are doing very well. The school's been successful. This will simply ensure that our students do have what they need in order to be successful. I urge passage of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman 76, I got Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 years ago, one of the first speeches I ever gave in this body had to do with the passage of the charter school bill. And I said at that time, this is the start of a death by 1,000 cuts to our public school education. And just this week in Marion County, we had a news article about the fact that we're going to have a $3 million deficit. We're already going to have to look next year at cutting teachers, not even shuffling them around, but actually getting rid of teachers in our classrooms. And now we're talking about trying to give more money to charter schools because they're already failing. And this is just ridiculous. We have needs in our public school system. We have the biggest surpluses we've ever had in the state of West Virginia, and stuff like this is happening, and we're just putting our heads in the sand. I can't support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman 59, Dr. Shamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise in opposition to this bill. As has already been stated, the needs in our public school systems are immense when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to school safety. My county, for example, runs several excess levies just to maintain the current infrastructure. Our school buildings are aging. They have tremendous maintenance challenges and problems. To me, when I think about the fact that over 90% of our students are educated in public schools, to think that we are going to create a fund that will subsidize charter schools when charter schools have means of procuring funding that public schools do not have. They can charge tuition. Public schools cannot do that. They're subsidized by the school aid formula. The funding follows the child under our current laws. And here we're going to go beyond. We're going to do something for them that we're not currently doing for public schools. I mean, look at the funding that's given to the school building authority. It isn't nearly sufficient to address all of the needs that public schools have. So I rise in strong opposition to this bill. I'm not going to vote to further defund our public schools. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 47th, Longnecker is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very quickly, I just want to remind everyone that these are public charter schools. This is a one-time grant to help these public charter schools get started. So what sits in the desks of these public charter schools? They're West Virginia kids. They're West Virginia kids. I'm hearing in this body right now that kids in the public school system, the traditional public school system, are more important than the kids in the public charter school. And I refuse to believe that. That's absurd. And I will tell you that where they're failing is not academically. This is for site prep, setup, buying desks, buying the things they need to get started so that they continue to help the kids that are falling through the cracks in the public system. That's all it is. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will urge passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 25th, Dr. Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect to my friend from the 47th, this is not a one-time fund. This is a fund that is open, that every year we will be tasked with putting more money into this fund for charter schools. To the gentleman from the 59th, he hit it right on the head. They have every single avenue right now for their dollars. They are part of the school aid formula, so it follows them. They have the ability to go out and get donations, receive gifts. What we are doing, we are making it unequal. And the public education kids are coming on the bottom half of this. We have set up a system to where not only are we eroding public education, we're going to tilt the hand towards the charter schools. Now, if we want it to be equal, we would make sure that they can only receive monies from private institutions and not more money from the state. Vote this bill down.
Gentleman from the 15th, Dr. Keaton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the Chairman of Education yield for a question?
Does the gentleman from the 38th yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
I just want to get a little bit of clarification. I think I know the answer to this question, but can public charter schools charge tuition?
No.
No, they can't. Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there other debate on the bill? If not, does the gentleman wish to close debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 38th is recognized to close debate on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As was stated, I do want to clarify, these are public charter schools. They are for public West Virginia students. So the issue at hand was they were supposed to receive about 90% of the student basic formula. In the first year, those two schools did not. They only received about $4,200 instead of around $9,000 to $10,000. So they had to work with just that appropriation. And they made do with what they had to do. The other part here is we only allow up to 10 charters currently. There are only 4. 2 of them are virtual. 2 more have applied and been accepted. This is a one-time grant of up to $300,000 that they have to apply for and have expended any other options that they could get that grant. So it's not a year after year. They only give that one other option for an extra $100,000 if they have the need. So it's not a perpetual thing. Now, if this legislature in the future wants to do that, that's up to them, as they can fund any other public school or any other county school if they would like to. So this is to help them be a little successful. They don't have their own school buses. This is to help them do that to transport their kids. It's also to help provide some of the other supplies they need. So this is probably something to help make successful for an alternative type of education, because not every kid fits into the traditional system. So we are having some success. This is something to help them get along with that. and I would urge passage, and we have hopefully corrected the funding formula for them so that it won't be an issue next year. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 62 ayes, 36 nays, 3 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 47, creating Charter Schools Stimulus Fund.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 121, creating Student Journalist Press Freedom Protection Act.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill creates specific First Amendment protections for high school, college, and university student journalists to determine news, opinions, features, or other content, irrespective of whether the student is using school facilities or supported financially by the school. It creates certain exceptions to the protections, such as the amendment yesterday, including obscene, vulgar, pornographic, or sensual or illicit sexual content. It requires the school has the burden of proving the justification for any prior restraint of speech. It provides an appeal process for students. It prohibits discipline action against a student, journalist, or media advisor acting in accordance with the article. It requires the promulgation of policies to include an appeal process. It provides for immunities for school officials for media content while acting in conformity with the section. It provides for injunctive and declaratory relief for students or media advisors, including attorney's fees. Requires exhaustion of administrative remedies prior to any legal action. Specifies that the article does not create an independent cause of action and exempts private high school, colleges, or universities. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker. I urge adoption.
The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 95 ayes, 1 nay, and 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 121, creating Student Journalist Press Freedom Protection Act.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Senate Bill 147, creating pilot program for recovery residences in Cabell County.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? Objection. There is objection. Clerk will please read the bill.
Chapter 37, Real Property. Article 6, Landlord and Tenant. 3765A, Recovery Residences. Pilot Program. A, the purpose of this section is to create a pilot program in Cabell County to study the uniqueness for recovery residences, a rate to landlord-tenant law, and determine an equitable resolution when circumstances arise which bring about an unanticipated cessation of an individual's participation in recovery residence program. B, for the purpose of this section. 1, recovery residence has the meaning ascribed in 1659-14 of this code is applied solely to recovery residences. A, not certified by the West Virginia Alliance for Recovery Residences, and B, located within Cabell County. 2, residence agreement means agreement between an individual residing in a recovery residence and the recovery residence. 3, resident means a person residing in and receiving services from a recovery residence. C, recovery residence may immediately discharge a resident without filing a petition for summary relief for wrongful occupation of resident rental property for any of the following reasons. 1, the use, possession, or distribution of alcohol, any controlled substances, or prescription medication for which the resident does not have a valid prescription. 2, sexual misconduct. 3, any crime of violence against a person or threat of crime of violence against a person. 4, any conduct which jeopardizes the safety of another resident. Or 5, destruction of the premises. D, if the recovery resident seeks to discharge a resident for a reason not enumerated in subdivisions 1 through 5, subsection C of this section, the resident is entitled to the due process and protection afforded a tenant as that term is defined in 376A1 of this code. The recovery resident shall be treated as a landlord as that term is defined in 376A1 of this code, and the recovery resident shall be required to proceed against the resident under 553A1 of this code with the filing of a petition for summary relief seeking removal of the resident for wrongful occupation of residential rental property, provided that any provision of a recovery resident agreement seeking to waive or limit the protections afforded a resident in this section is void. E, if a resident is discharged, evicted, or otherwise removed from a recovery residence prior to the expiration of time period for which he or she has previously paid rent or any other fee for residency or services, the recovery resident shall issue a refund of the rent or fee to the discharged resident in an amount prorated or on a per diem basis to account for the remainder of that time period. F, if requested by the resident, recovery resident shall first apply any refund required by subsection E of this section to costs related to placing the resident in a higher level care facility or transferring the resident to another recovery residence, provided that if the resident does not request to be placed in a higher level care facility or does not request to be transferred to another recovery residence within 72 hours of the resident's discharge, eviction, or removal, the recovery resident shall issue any refund due to a resident. Provided, however, that if the rent or fee monies were paid by a third party on behalf of the resident, any refund required by subsection E of this section shall be issued directly to third-party payer within 72 hours of a resident's discharge, eviction, or removal. G, if a resident was transferred to a recovery residence from a location more than 20 miles from the recovery resident is discharged, evicted, or otherwise removed from the recovery residence shall provide transportation to the location from which the resident was initially transported to the discharged, evicted, or otherwise removed resident at the expense of the recovery residence. H, if the resident is discharged, evicted, or otherwise removed prior to the expiration time period for which he or she has previously paid rent or any other fee for residency or services, recovery resident shall report non-identifying resident information regarding the reason for the early discharge, eviction, removal of the resident to the Department of Health and Human Resources, Bureau for Behavioral Health. I, on or before July 1, 2024, the Department of Health and Human Resources Bureau for Behavioral Health shall prepare and submit to Joint Committee of Government Finance a written report which includes at a minimum, 1, the information specified in subsection H of this section for the period May 1, 2023 through May 1, 2024. 2, an eviction of the effectiveness of the pilot program. 3, a recommendation as to whether a pilot program created in this section shall be continued, reduced, expanded, terminated, or otherwise modified. 4, any recommendation, legislation, and 5, any other issues deemed relevant. I, this section shall not be construed to affect rights under West Virginia Fair Housing Act, West Virginia Code 511A et sec. K, this section shall be of no further force and effect on May 1, 2024. Article 6A, residential rental security deposits. 37685, landlord's non-compliance. A, if a landlord fails to comply with any provision of this article, and the non-compliance is willful or not in good faith, the tenant is entitled to a judgment for 1, the amount of any unreturned security deposit, and 2, damages for annoyance or inconvenience resulting from the landlord's non-conformance equal to 1.5 times the amount wrongfully withheld unless the tenant owes rent to the landlord, in which case the court shall order an amount to any amount awarded to the tenant pursuant to subject to be credited against any rent due to the landlord, provided that the individuals residing in a recovery residence defined in 37658 of this code, the recovery residence is required to comply with the provisions of this article, and if the recovery residence non-compliance is willful or not in good faith, the court shall also award reasonable attorney's fees. B, jurisdiction for any civil action brought pursuant to this article shall be a magistrate or circuit court in the county where the residential rental premises or units are located. C, this section does not limit rights or remedies available to landlord or tenant under any other law. D, the amendments to this section enacted by the legislature during 2022 regular session shall not be construed to affect rights under the West Virginia Fair Housing Act, West Virginia Code, Chapter 511A at 1 et sec. E, this section shall not apply to a resident or recovery resident as defined in 37658 of this code after May 1, 2024. Chapter 55, action suits and arbitration, judicial sale. Article 3, remedies for wrongful occupation of residential rental property. 55.3A1, petition for summary relief for wrongful occupation of residential rental property. A person desiring to remove a tenant, including a resident of a recovery resident, as defined in 37658 of this code, is discharged for a reason other than those enumerated in 37655C1 through 5 of this code from residential rental property may apply for relief to the magistrate or circuit court of the county in which the property is located by verified petition setting forth the following. 1, that he or she is the owner or agent of the owner and such has a right to recover possession of the property. 2, a brief description of the property sufficient to identify it. 3, that the tenant is wrongfully occupying the property and that the tenant in arrears in the payment of rent has breached a warranty or leasehold covenant or has deliberately or negligently damaged the property or knowingly permitted another person to do so, and describing such arrears, breach, or act or omission, and 4, a prayer for possession of the property. B, previous to the filing of the petition, the person shall request from the county the time and place at which the petitioner shall be heard. The court shall fix a time for the hearing, which time shall not be less than 5 nor more than 10 judicial days following the request.
C, immediately upon being apprised of the time and place of the hearing, the petitioner shall have a notice of the hearing served upon the tenant in accordance with the provision of Rule 4 of the West Virginia Rules of Civil Procedure or by certified mail. Return receipt requested. The notice shall inform the tenant that any defense of the petition shall be submitted in writing to the petitioner within 5 days of the receipt by the tenant of the notice, and in no case later than 5th day next preceding the date of hearing. Upon receipt of return of service or the return receipt, as the case may be, evidence of service upon the tenant, the petitioner shall file with the court his or her petition and such proof of service. D, the amendments to this section added by the legislature during the 2020 regular session not be construed to affect the rights under West Virginia Fair Housing Act, West Virginia Code 5A 11A 1 et sec. E, this section shall not apply to a resident of recovery residence defined in 3765 of this code after May 1, 2024.
Question is, shall the House be in order? Question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Clerk will present. Yes. For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Would the chairman yield?
Okay, we had not yet taken the vote, so Chair will recognize the gentleman for a question.
You'll yield. Thank you. Although I appreciate the reading of the bill and that everybody can be more familiar with it, but I do have a couple questions. It does list this puts into code several instances where a participant in a recovery residential recovery program could be removed without the eviction process. Now, underneath that, there's a section. Let me see if I can find this here, where it talks about if they are removed for any reason, about the return of rent that would possibly be owed. So would that apply to any resident, or would that not apply to the ones that were removed for the what's in the statute?
So if is the question to distinguish whether somebody is removed for the enumerated causes versus somebody that is removed that was evicted under the...
Okay, I'm looking at line, let's see here. I think it would be line 30 of section, let me scroll up here. Like the subsection E, if a resident is discharged, evicted, or otherwise removed from a recovery residence prior to the expiration of the time period for which he or she has previously paid rent, does that apply to any of the residents?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so they would get their money back in that particular amount of time, even if they relapsed on drugs or alcohol.
Are you pointing to a certain?
I mean,
I don't see
yes or no.
I don't see relapse. I mean, is relapse one of the?
Yeah, it's the first one.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. The use and possession. So if the eviction occurred under C1, the question is, would that tenant or that resident receive money back if they had paid forward for rent or they were ahead on rent?
What you just said was, when you answered the other question, you said that this subsection about getting their money back in a prompt fashion, right, would apply to anybody, whether they violated something in the statute or not. So the question is, so even if they were in a relapse and were using drugs or alcohol, they would still get money back in their hand?
Yes, to the extent that there was previously paid rent or any other fee.
Yeah. So they'd still get money back in their hands mid-relapse. I'm going to go on to a completely different subject about this bill, though. I'm going to change gears a little bit if you don't mind. Is there anything about this bill that would you think might violate equal protection? Since we're giving certain rights to certain types of tenants, but not all tenants in law?
Well, I think that it's not uncommon, actually I know that it's not uncommon for this legislature to enact pilot programs that are targeted to be tested in a particular area with a particular scope.
In
I think
regards
this is-
to regulating practice in courts of justice, you think we could do pilot programs on that?
So this is, again, a pilot. Typically, laws that we pass are laws of general applicability. And if a law is going to be tailored to a particular county, it would technically be an act of the legislature. Here, you can get around having to do an act of the legislature by doing a pilot program, and the one before us is for 1 year. And it proposes to put forth a structure that can be tried in a particular limited area in limited circumstances to see if that effectively combats a crisis that we all know too well.
Okay. We'll get to that in a second. Are you familiar with Article 6, Section 39 of the West Virginia Constitution?
We could have the clerk read it.
We don't need to, I mean, do you have the Constitution over there?
I have it right here in my drawer. Would you like me to fetch
All
it?
right. Article 6, Section 39.
Sure, stand by.
Thank you.
Got it.
Okay. What's that article section? What section is that? What's it called?
Local laws not be passed in enumerated cases.
Okay. Local laws not to be passed. Can scroll down a little bit. You can see where it says regulating the practice of in courts of justice.
I'm old school. I got a hard copy.
Okay. Well, you can scroll down with your finger, and it's regulating the practice in courts of justice. That's not a local law not to be passed. A local law regulating the practice in courts of justice. Is that in there?
I see that.
It's in the Constitution.
I see
Okay.
that.
What about a little bit further down in that section, another local law not to be passed, specifically laid out in our Constitution, remitting fines, penalties, or forfeitures. Is that in there?
I see that.
Okay. Do you believe that this law is constitutional?
Yes.
Please explain.
You have not laid out to me why you believe it to be not constitutional or unconstitutional.
Yes, because it's in the West Virginia Constitution in Article 6, Section 39, local laws not to be passed, and this is a local law. Cabell County, this is a local law.
I tried to lay out the foundational principle of legislative action as I discussed with regard to pilot programs. If the gentleman will recall, I believe he was a member of the committee at the time in which we passed a pilot program for the southern part of West Virginia that related to the courts of justice. So this is not a novel concept.
Mm-hmm. And did that remit fines, penalties, forfeitures, or create different classes of tenants, for example, where this type of tenant would have a certain amount of rights and other tenants would not?
Oh, I'm sure that bill laid out certain fines and penalties. It was dealing with a court.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't remember it that way. I appreciate you yielding, sir, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for yielding. It's my belief that, one reason that this is a bad bill, there's many reasons, and I'll go through a few of them as briefly as I can. It is clearly unconstitutional, and it's going to create a whole lot of problems when you're going into wrongful occupancy laws and landlord-tenant laws and creating a separate class here of those who would actually have less rights than others. I think it would give a whole lot of people a lot of standing to challenge this law. Whether we're setting up different rules for those who are quote-unquote tenants, by giving this false definition of tenants for people who aren't actually tenants, you could be changing the law for those who are actually tenants and those who are actually landlords. I think this is it creates a real mess, and it's not a very good an attempt at a solution to a problem that there are quite many other ways to deal with, and I'll get to that in a second. But really, you're giving different rights to folks who live in recovery residences than you are to other tenants. And I believe if, and I hope it doesn't pass, if this does pass and gets signed, it will be challenged and it will be struck down. It's clearly unconstitutional. Now, another reason that it is a really bad bill, not a well thought out piece of legislation, is what I was asked. The first part of my questions was, what happens when a participant in a recovery residence has to leave because they've relapsed and because they started using drugs or alcohol again, and it says in code how quickly the program has to hand them money. You know, I know we just read the bill and that gives everybody time to take a break and everything, but there, like I said yesterday, there are very few bills in here that we take up that actually are life or death issues. This is, especially this part of the bill, when somebody would be in mid-relapse, somebody in early recovery moves into one of these houses, they're in mid-relapse, they have to leave because their behavior affects everybody else in the house, and we're putting it in code how quickly they're going to have to be handed money to kill themselves with. This will result in overdose deaths. This is not a well thought out piece of legislation. It is unconstitutional. It'll increase the amount of overdose deaths in this state. There's two good reasons not to vote for it. Now, one of my main concerns with this bill to begin with is that, okay, and let's talk about the problem a little bit. There is a problem with the ability to regulate recovery residences. And that's why we created a certifying agency. We recognize a certifying agency, the West Virginia Alliance of Recovery Residences, and we say, if you're not certified, then you don't get state funds and you don't get referrals. The problem is we've created no enforcement for that. I think we have, this session, we have looked into that and increased the, actually gave somebody the enforcement, I believe the Inspector General, and we did take up the Patient Brokering Act again and actually give some enforcement to that, because what the bad houses are doing, they're engaging in, they've linked up with behavioral health, because that's where you can bill Medicaid. We heard a testimony in the Judiciary Committee when I was sitting in that these houses are somehow overbilling Medicaid. You can't bill Medicaid for rent. Medicaid is for medical expenses. These houses are not medical facilities. The bad houses will link up with medical facilities, and that's where the patient brokering comes in. That's where the law is being broken. If you want to go after the bad houses, chop off the head of the snake, not the tail. Go after the Medicaid billing. That's what we're doing with the Patient Brokering Act. What this does, it sets up a way that either good or bad houses will just find themselves in court. Whether it's a bad house or whether it's a good house that may or may not be operated by many of the churches that some of you attend operate these types of houses. This bill will have them, they could place them in court. And while I appreciate the amendment that was made in Judiciary that say it wouldn't apply to certified houses, I have just a strange feeling that there will be an attempt by the Senate to remove that. I've heard they want that out of the bill. So I would ask the body to reject the bill. It's not well thought out. It is not a way to deal with an issue that we have. And I looked into the numbers in Cabell County because I heard during this testimony about busloads of people from out of state being brought in. and then kicked out, and then they bring in another busload. I've not seen one shred of evidence to this. In a day and age when every single one of us walks around with a camera, every single person you know walks around with a camera, I've yet to see a single picture of a single bus. But I actually went and got the data for Cabell County, and around 5% of the residences, of recovery residences in Cabell County are from out of state. 5%. Of that 5%, over 75% of them are from over the river in Ohio or Kentucky. We do need to regulate these houses, but we have a system in place to do that. We need to give that system time. We need to better fund the Alliance of Recovery Residences. I think they have 4 staff members for the entire state. We need to enforce patient brokering. We need more inspections, site inspections of these houses. But setting up a system where a plaintiff's attorney can just take all these places to court, good or bad, take your church to court, is what's going to happen with this bill. This is not the way to go. So, and it's clearly unconstitutional. It will hand people money mid-relapse that they can use to kill themselves with, and it'll just tie up some of the good houses that are actually doing the Lord's work of giving people a safe place to live while they try to get their lives together. It's going to tie them up in court. I strongly urge a no vote on this bill. It is a bad piece of legislation. That's why it had to be forced to the floor. When it first came up in the Select Committee for the Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse, it died. I believe there was one yes vote on a voice vote. It died on the merits of the bill because it's a bad bill. It was forced back in the next committee. They forced it out of the committee, and people even said, I'm not sure if I support this bill, but we'll clean it up. We sort of cleaned it up. It's just a bad bill. So I would strongly urge you to vote against it, not send it anywhere.
Is there other debate on this bill? If not, gentlemen, 55th to close debate on the bill. If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 43 ayes, 52 nays, 5 members absent, less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill lost. Clerk will please report the next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 187, making it felony offense for school employee or volunteer to engage in sexual contact with students.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Chair will recognize the gentleman from the 55th to explain the bill.
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. I believe we moved this one to third with amendments pending or right to amend, I think.
We did. This bill is moved to third reading now with amendments pending and the general right to amend. The clerk will please report the amendment.
Committee on the Judiciary moves to amend the bill.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 55th to explain the committee amendment.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The committee amendment incorporates some changes that were made in committee. The most prominent was to expand the sort of jurisdiction of this law to offenses that occur on college campuses. The bill deals with sexual offenses committed on individuals that are between 18 and 20 years old, and it originally dealt with public and private schools at a primary and secondary level, but it was extended to colleges as well. That's the crux of the amendment.
The question is on the adoption of the amendment just explained by the gentleman from the 55th. Is there debate on the amendment? Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there other amendments to the bill? If not, clerk will please read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 187, making it felony offense for school employee or volunteer to engage in sexual contact with students.
Gentleman from the 55th is recognized to offer any further explanation of the bill that may be necessary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll quickly run through. With the committee amendment added, it prohibits certain school personnel or volunteer from engaging in sexual conduct with a student from 18 to 20 years old. It requires a showing that the student is enrolled in the school and that the personnel has supervisory or disciplinary power over that student. It creates an exemption for persons that are married. It applies to public and private secondary schools, colleges, universities, vocational schools, and career and technical colleges. And the penalty associated with this offense is a crime. It's a felony punishable by 1 to 5 years and not more than a $5,000 fine. The crime will be in addition to any other crimes, and it provides that the teaching or other certificate is permanently forfeited if convicted under this statute. I urge passage of the bill.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Gentleman from the 94th, Delegate Kumps, recognized.
Speak on the bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really didn't want to speak on this bill. For sure and for certain, this legislation troubles me. Perhaps the most of any I've had to vote on during my 4 terms of legislative service. In the Judiciary Committee, the discussion was intense and spirited. Emotions ran deep, and rightly so. Since then, I've continued to prayerfully ponder this response regarding how I was going to vote on the floor. I even considered taking a bathroom break, but then I considered that's not why I'm here. There's 2 issues in my mind. First of all, the behavior of these sexual predators is deeply disturbing, but not just in this age group, in any age group. Secondly, this proposal specifically provides felony prosecution of the behavior of legally consenting adults. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 52nd, Delegate Rowe is recognized.
Would the Chair of Judiciary answer a few questions? Sir, if somebody was a volunteer or a coach and they were 21 years of age and they had sexual contact with somebody who was a student that was 19 years of age, would that be a felony under this bill?
If they had supervisory or disciplinary oversight, yes.
In other words, if they were in their classroom or if they were on their team?
I mean, that would, of course, you would know that would have to be a finding that was made, but again, it would come down to whether there was supervisory or disciplinary oversight of the victim or student.
I think in other sexual offenses, we have an age gap, like for statutory rape, and if I recollect, I haven't seen those statutes in a while since being off judiciary, but I think we have a gap, but in this case, we don't have that gap, correct?
We do not.
And it applies to private and public schools?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Is there other debate on the bill? If not, does the gentleman wish to close debate on the bill? If not, the question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 90 ayes, 7 nays, 3 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 187, making it felony offense for school employee or volunteer to engage in sexual contact with students.
Are there title amendments?
Delegate Capito moves to amend the title.
The question is on the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 200, allowing leashed dogs to track wounded elk, turkey, and wild boar when
Are there
hunting.
objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? Gentleman from the 51st, I'll get fast to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would amend the statute to allow using leashed dogs to track and locate mortally wounded deer, elk, turkey, wild boar, and deer, as I said. Allow permit holders or certain physically disabled hunters to designate another hunter who holds a valid hunting license to accompany the dog handler to kill mortally wounded animals, and provides that mortally wounded animals shall count towards bag limit of hunter who fired the initial shot. That's a summary, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 200, allowing leashed dogs to track wounded elk, turkey, and wild boar when hunting.
Are there title amendments?
Delegate Capito moves to amend the title.
Are there the questions on the adoption of the title amendment? Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 220, Industrial Hemp Development Act.
Ladies and gentlemen, this bill was advanced to third reading with the general right to amend. Just time, the chair will ask the clerk to please report the primary amendment.
The Committee on the Judiciary moves to amend the bill.
Are there objections to having the primary amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 55th to explain the primary amendment. We do have secondary amendments. We'll have the primary amendment explained, and we'll take up the secondary amendments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Instead of an exhausting explanation of the strike and insert, really the changes here were requested to us by the Department of Agriculture to be more consistent with the regulatory authority they currently have over this product, so it's mostly technical in nature. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge adoption.
You've heard the primary amendment explained. Clerk will please report the first of the secondary amendments.
Delegate Fluharty moves to amend the amendment.
Are there objections to having this amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 5th to explain the secondary amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.
Withdraw the amendment. Are there objections? There are no objections. That secondary amendment will be withdrawn. Clerk will please report the next secondary amendment.
Delegate Capito moves to amend the amendment.
Are there objections to allowing this secondary amendment to be explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 55th to explain the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would direct the body's attention to the primary amendment, which begins on line 7. There it begins with a proviso and discusses that the provisions of this section, which means the regulation of certain hemp products, would not preclude those that are 21 years, that are younger than the age of 21 years to purchase or sell these products. Commonly, and these are products without THC in them, and commonly these are jackets, flip-flops, sweatshirts, a lot of clothing that has pieces of the hemp stem in it. And when we were going through, we realized that there were so many products that would fall under this very broad bill that we did. So we're exempting out of this bill, outside of the regulatory capture of this act, we are exempting those products which contain no THC, most of which come from the stems of these plants, and again are no danger to the health, safety, and well-being of West Virginians. So I would urge adoption of the secondary amendment.
The question is on the secondary amendment just explained. Is there debate on this secondary amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the secondary amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares that secondary amendment adopted. Are there other secondary amendments? If not, the question is on the primary amendment as amended. Is there debate on the primary amendment? Gentleman from the 55th.
Since the primary amendment is a strike and insert, I will explain the strike and insert, and then we'll move on to passage. But the bill provides regulation of hemp and kratom products by the Department of Agriculture in coordination with the Commissioner of the Alcohol Beverage Control Administration. It limits the sale of certain kratom and hemp products to persons under the age of 21. We just made the amendment to pull out certain classifications of hemp from the grasp of the Act. It provides a regulatory scheme for both products. It imposes an excise tax of 11% of the retail sale value, the proceeds of which are divided between the Commissioner of Agriculture, the Fight Substance Abuse Fund, and the Alcohol Beverage Control Enforcement Fund. It declares products not approved by the Commissioner to be contraband and subject to seizure, forfeiture, and destruction, with a provision that this subsection is effective upon passage. Also creates a number of new criminal offenses associated with violation of this section for unlawful possession, distribution, and sale of unapproved products to persons under the age of 21. It does grant the ABCA with certain enforcement authority throughout the strike and insert. I'd urge adoption.
Question is, shall the primary amendment be adopted? Is there debate on this amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. As opposed, will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares that primary amendment adopted. The question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there, clerk will please read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 220, Industrial Hemp Development Act.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 92 ayes, 4 nays, and 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 220, Industrial Hemp Development Act.
Are there title amendments?
Delegate Capito moves to amend the title.
Questions on the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 232, creating study group to make recommendations regarding diversion of persons with disabilities from criminal justice system.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Chair will recognize the gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill creates a multidisciplinary study group to make recommendations to the legislature about methods for addressing diversion of persons with certain disabilities from the criminal justice system. It provides that the group would be convened by the chair of the Dangerous Assessment Advisory Board and would be made up of some 18 people from multiple disciplines. It provides that the open meetings and FOIA laws are inapplicable to the group. It provides for a per diem day rate for non-governmental members of the group, and it also provides for recommendations to be made to the Speaker of the House of Delegates and the President of the Senate by November 30, 2023. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 96 ayes, 0 nays, and 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 232, creating study group to make recommendations regarding diversion of persons with disabilities from criminal justice system.
Are there title amendments?
Delegate Capito moves to amend the title.
The question is on the title amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. Gentleman from the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill take effect from its passage.
The question is on the motion that the bill take effect from passage. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Senate Bill 240, requiring State Board of Examination or registration proceedings to be open to public inspection.
Question is, shall the bill pass, or are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? Objection is heard. Clerk will please read the bill.
Article 1, general provisions applicable to all state boards of examination registration referred to in Chapter 3112. Record of proceedings, register of applicants, certified copies of record prima facie evidence, report to governor and legislature, public access. A, the secretary of every board shall keep a record of proceedings and a register of all applicants for license or registration showing for each the date of his or her application, his or her name, age, educational, and other qualifications, mailing address, whether an examination was required, whether the applicant was rejected, or a certificate of license or registration granted. The date of this action, the license or registration number, all renewals of the license or registration, if required, and any suspension or revocation thereof. The books and register or a copy of any part thereof certified by the secretary and attested by the seal of the board shall be prima facie evidence of all matters recorded therein. B, the record of the board's proceedings shall be open to the public inspection at all reasonable times, and copies provided upon oral or written request after payment of a reasonable fee as determined by the board in accordance with the provisions of 29B13 of this code. C, the register applicants shall be made available upon written request on a form prescribed by the board. The form shall require the requester to provide at least the following information. 1, legal identity. 2, purpose for which the register is sought. 3, a telephone number where the requester may be contacted by the board. And 4, whether copies of the register are requested. If requested, a copy of the register shall be provided after payment of a reasonable fee as determined by the board in accordance with the provisions of 29B13 of this code. The board may deny a request that the register or copies thereof be made available or provided if it determines in its discretion that the request is made for an improper purpose. D, on or before January 1 of each year in which the legislature meets in regular session, the board shall submit to the governor to the legislature a report of its activities between 2 years containing the following information for that period. 1, the total receipts and disbursements for each year. 2, a list of amounts received in each year for the following categories of receipts. A, license applications, registration, and renewals. B, examination fees if applicable. C, other fees including late fees, copying charges, and fees for printed certificates. D, fines or penalties. E, expense reimbursements from disciplinary actions. And F, grants, special appropriations, or other source of revenue not from fees. 3, list of amounts spent each year for the following categories of expenditures. A, personal services. B, board member per diem compensation. C, travel expense and automobile mileage. D, professional contracts. E, rent. F, office supplies. G, postage. H, entertainment and hosting. I, insurance. And J, bank costs. 4, a complete list of the names of all persons newly licensed or registered. 5, a table list showing numbers of licensees are registered by West Virginia County in practice or for out-of-state licensees or registrants by state of residence and by specialty if appropriate to particular profession. 6, complaints filed and investigations made by the board with a brief classification of the nature of the complaint together with the dates of compliance with the time requirements of 30-1-5C of this code and the disposition, if any. 7, in addition to complaints reported on the preceding subdivision complaints resolved in the investigation closed by the board with a brief classification of the nature of the complaint together with dates of compliance with this time requirements of 30-1-5C of this code and the disposition, if any. And 8, copies of the agendas for and minutes of board and committee of subcommittee meetings. The report shall be certified by the President and Secretary of the Board, and a copy of the report shall be filed with the Secretary of State and Legislative Librarian. E, Tomorrow, Public Assets Secretary of every board shall ensure that the address, telephone number of the board are included every year in state government listings of the Charleston Area Telephone Directory. Every board shall maintain a website that provides at least the following information. 1, name of each board member. 2, name of all board staff. 3, contact information for each staff member, including office telephone number, office location, office mailing address. A, secure electronic means to contact each staff member. 5, the roster of licensed registered practitioners. 6, copies of approved meeting minutes for meetings held during the preceding year. 7, a schedule of regular meetings days for each calendar year. And 8, notice of each upcoming board meeting. 30-1-12, prohibition against disclosure of personal identifiable information exceptions. 8, definitions. Personal identifier or PII means any information that identifies or can be used to identify, locate, contact, or impersonate a particular individual. Sensitive PII means those elements of PII that must receive heightened protection due to legal or policy requirements, including but not limited to 1, social security numbers, 2, credit card numbers, 3, health and media data, 4, driver license numbers, and 5, individual financial account numbers. B, a board may not disclose the PII of applicants, licensees, registers, or other individuals if necessary to comply with the register or federal law, court order, or subpoena.
C, nothing in this section or section 12 of this article shall prohibit a board from providing information related to qualifications and practice of licensees registered with the board's website, including elements to educational training, qualifications, specialties, and practice addresses. 30-1-13 roster of licensed or registered practitioners. The secretary of every board shall prepare and maintain a complete roster of the names of all persons licensed or registered practicing the state profession or occupation which such board relates, range applicability by name. Each board shall make the roster available upon request to any member of the public and shall also place and maintain the roster on its website.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there were 74 ayes, 0 nays, and 26 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 240, requiring State Board of Examination or registration proceedings to be open to public inspection.
Are there title amendments?
Delegate Phillips moves to amend the title.
Questions on the adoption of the title amendment? Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. Title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 247, making administrative appeals and judicial review of board action subject to provisions of Administrative Procedures Act.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Or are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chapter 30 boards govern the licensing and regulation of certain fields such as dentistry, accounting, engineering, etc. Among other things, these boards are statutorily authorized to suspend or revoke the licenses of members to practice in the fields regulated by the board. The bill would make appeals of final board action on licensure subject to the appellate provisions of the Administrative Procedures Act. The practical effect of this would be that appeals of final board decisions would be filed with the Intermediate Court of Appeals, assuming the board's decision was issued after June 30, 2022, instead of Circuit Court. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 89 ayes, 0 nays, and 11 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 247, making administrative appeals and judicial review of board action subject to provisions of Administrative Procedures Act.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 258, eliminating ceiling on fair market value of consumer goods and permitting dealer to require security deposit.
This bill was advanced to third reading with the right to amend. Are there amendments?
Delegate Steele moves to amend the bill.
Gentleman 42nd, Douglas Steele is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd ask unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment.
Are there objections to having the amendment withdrawn? There are no objections, and the amendment will be withdrawn. Are there other amendments to the bill? If not, clerk will please read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 258, eliminating ceiling on fair market value of consumer goods and permitting dealer to require security deposit.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Or are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 55th, Doug Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This part of the code regulates rent-to-own transactions involving consumer goods. Under existing law, the current maximum fair market value of any single item in such an agreement cannot exceed $10,000. This removes that ceiling. The bill would also permit rent-to-own contracts for consumer goods to include a security deposit. Chapter 46B was enacted in 1993. The $10,000 ceiling on fair market value set forth in the current version is not indexed for inflation. Exact estimates vary, but the current inflation adjustment value of $10,000 exceeds $20,000. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 93 ayes, 0 nays, 7 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 258, eliminating ceiling on fair market value of consumer goods and permitting dealer to require security deposit.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next, bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 271, modifying approval process requirements for First Responders Honor Board.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman of the 68th, Douglas Phillips, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of Senate Bill 271 is to allow nominees for the First Responders Honor Board to be considered by the legislature at other than its next regular session. I urge passage.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 271, modifying approval process requirements for First Responders Honor Board.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next, bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 298, relating to non-federally declared emergencies and non-states of emergency.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Or are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman of the 51st, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends a single section of code by adding a new subsection, C, to 1559, clarifying that local West Virginia organizations may enter into mutual aid agreements with emergency services, civil defense agencies, and organizations of bordering counties in contiguous states for day-to-day mutual aid, support for fire and emergency medical services, regardless of whether a federal or state emergency has been declared. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 0 nays, and 4 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 298, relating to non-federally declared emergencies and non-states of emergency.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Gentleman of the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill take effect from its passage.
The question is on the motion that the bill take effect from its passage. Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 97 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 members absent, 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, the chair was remiss earlier in not returning to the second order of business at 11 o'clock, as I said we would. So at this time, are there objections to returning for the purpose of introductions? No objections are heard. Are there introductions? Gentleman from the 25th, David Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, March is a very special time of year for us because we have a lot of good basketball. We've got state championships. We've got March Madness. And I have a very special guest with us today and dear friend in the West Gallery. If he would please stand up. I have Logan High School great and first team All-State and champion, also Marshall great guard, Stevie Browning from Logan. House, please make him feel welcome.
Are there other introductions at this time? And if not, next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 302 relating to Law Enforcement Safety Act.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill requires all state law enforcement agencies to index all felony warrants with the FBI National Crime Information Center, NCIC. That is it, Mr. Speaker. Urge passage.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk, prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 90 ayes, 0 nays, and 10 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 302 relating to Law Enforcement Safety Act.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 361 authorizing miscellaneous boards and agencies to promulgate legislative rules.
Ladies and gentlemen, this bill was advanced to third reading yesterday with the general right to amend. There is an amendment pending. The chair will ask the clerk to please report the amendment.
The Committee on the Judiciary moves to amend the bill.
Are there objections to having this amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 55th to explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This amendment deals with a very specific rule dealing with acupuncture. Currently in the rule, an acupuncturist can't go any deeper than just under the skin, but we've been informed by the board and practitioners that at times they will actually go into the muscle. So we are making the adjustment to ensure that they can appropriately perform their job. So I would urge adoption.
The question is on the primary amendment. We do have a secondary amendment. The clerk will please report the secondary amendment.
Delegate Capito moves to amend the amendment.
Are there objections to having the secondary amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, shall recognize the gentleman to explain the secondary amendment.
Well, I apologize, Mr. Thank you. I apologize. I believe I just did explain the secondary amendment. The primary amendment I will get to with the explanation of the bill or the rules as we go through them, if that satisfies the body. Thank you.
How about we have the gentleman explain the secondary amendment again, just so members
The secondary amendment deals with acupuncturists. It allows an acupuncturist to go more than just under the skin and in certain cases go into the muscle. That's an explanation of the secondary amendment. Once again, my error, Mr. Speaker. I apologize. I urge adoption of that secondary amendment.
Question is on the secondary amendment just explained. Is there debate on the secondary amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the secondary amendment will please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. All right, the ayes have it. Chair declares that secondary amendment adopted. The question now is on the primary amendment as amended. Gentleman from the 55th.
I suppose with unanimous consent, I'd like to explain explain all of the rules at once. So with unanimous consent of the body, I would like to, and the lady, I'd like to hold my explanation until we get to the bill. But I would urge adoption of the primary amendment.
Okay, is there debate on the primary amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the primary amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. All right, the ayes have it. Chair declares the primary amendment adopted. So now the clerk will please read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 361 authorizing miscellaneous boards and agencies to promulgate legislative rules.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, objection is heard. Clerk will please read the bill.
2. Page 2, striking out 6-1. Page 2. So it's after line 10.
Just the bill, guys, not the rules.
On page 1. On page 1, section 2, subsection B, after line 10. So it's going to be, instead of this,
You got to post it.
and then just read this once you get to there.
Once I get to hand washing?
Yes.
Or
Give us
after line 10. I got it. Article 9, authorization for a Department of Miscellaneous Agencies and Boards to promulgate legislative rules. 6491, Board of Accountancy. The legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 27, 2022, authorized under authority of 30-9-5 of this code relating to the Board of Accountancy. Board Rules of Professional Conduct, 1 CSR 01 is authorized. 6492, Board of Acupuncture. A legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 29, 2022, authorized under the authority of 30-36-14F of this code, modified the Board of Acupuncture to meet the objections of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on September 28, 2022, relating to the Board of Acupuncture of advertising by licensed acupuncturists. 32 CSR 05 is authorized. B, the legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 30, 2022, authorized under the authority of 30-36-7 of this code, modified by the Board of Acupuncture to meet the objections of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, refiled in the State Register on September 28, 2022, relating to the Board of Acupuncture standards of practice of acupuncture by licensed acupuncturists. 32 CSR 06 is authorized with the amendment set forth below. On page 2, striking out section 6.1 and inserting new section 6.1 to read as follows. Injection therapy. A practitioner shall be limited to perform point puncture injections using sterile disposable needles and sterile solutions. Injection therapy shall be injection of sterile herbs, vitamins, minerals, homeopathic substance, or other similar substance specifically manufactured for injection into acupuncture points by means of sterile needles used primarily for this purpose. Permissible substances include saline, glucose, lidocaine, procaine, oriental herbs, vitamin B12, tourmaline, serapin, and homeopathic substances. Practitioner trained in injection therapy must comply with the ability to perform resuscitative procedures, including access to epinephrine injections and nasal oxygen if their patient exhibits symptoms of anaphylaxis. On page 3, C, the legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 29, 22, authorized under the authority of 30-36-7 of this code, modified the Board of Acupuncture to meet the objection of the Legislative Rule Committee and refiled in the State Register on September 28, 22, relating to the Board of Acupuncture continuing education requirements. 32 CSR 09 is authorized. 6493, Department of Agriculture. A legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 18, 2022, authorizing the authority of 1913-4 of this code, modified by the Department of Agriculture to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on October 3, 2022, relating to the Department of Agriculture, West Virginia Apiary Rule. 61 CSR 02 is authorized with the amendment set forth below. On page 2, by striking out of section 3.1 and inserting thereof the new section 3.1 to read as follows. 3.1, the Commissioner shall furnish an application for registration of bees to all persons known to keep bees. The Commissioner shall mail the applications during the month of June to all persons who have registered their bees during the previous year. Upon receipt of a properly executed bee registration application, the Commissioner shall issue a certificate of registration which will be based upon the information provided on the application. The legislative rule filed in the State Register on May 12, 2022, authorized under the authority of 19.210 of this code, modified by the Department of Agriculture to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on September 22, 2022, relating to the Department of Agriculture schedule of charges for inspection services. Fruit 61 CSR 08B is authorized. C, the legislative rule filed in the State Register on June 14, 2022, authorized under the authority of 1912D4 of this code, modified by the Department of Agriculture to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on September 22, 2022, relating to the Department of Agriculture noxious weed rule 61 CSR 14A is authorized. D, the legislative rule filed in the State Register July 1, 2022, authorized under the authority of 1911 EA1 of this code, modified by the Department of Agriculture to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled the State Register on September 22, 2022, relating to the Department of Agriculture Grade A pasteurized milk 61 CSR 15 is authorized. E, the legislative rule filed in the State Register on November 15, 2021, authorized under the authority of 1929 for this code, modified by Agriculture Commissioner to meet the objection of the Legislative Rule Review Making Committee, and refiled in State Register on October 26, 22, related to the Agriculture Commissioner inspection of non-traditional domesticated animals. 61 CSR 23D is authorized. F, the legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 28, 2022, authorized under the authority of 1912E7 of this code, modified by the Department of Agriculture to meet the objection of the Legislative Rule Making Review Committee, and refiled the State Register on September 22, 2022, relating to the Department of Agriculture hemp products. 61 CSR 30 is authorized. G, the legislative rule
filed in the State Register on June 2nd, 2022, authorizing the authority of 19(1)C of this code, modified Department records to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on September 22, 2022, related to the Department of Agriculture, Livestock Care Standards, 61 CSR 31 is authorized. H, legislative rule filed in the State Register on May 18, 2022, authorizing the authority of 1113 D5B of this code, modified by the Department of Agriculture to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on September 22, 2022, relating to Department of Agriculture Farm to Food Bank Credit, 61 CSR 36 is authorized with the amendments set forth below. On page 3, after 5.2C, by inserting the following, no more than $200,000 of tax credits may be allocated to the Department of Agriculture in any fiscal year. And on page 4, by striking out Section 5.3 and inserting in lieu thereof a new Section 5.3 to read as follows. 5.3, after read the receipt form and any supportive documentation after inserting the limit of $200,000 of tax credits per fiscal year has not been exceeded, Department of Agriculture should determine the amount, if any, of the tax credit due to farming taxpayer. The amount of the credit is equal to 30% of the value of donated edible agricultural products, but not to exceed $5,000 during a taxable year. Iowa State Rule filed in State Register June 24, 22, authorizing the authority of 1935 for this code, modified before records to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on September 22, 2022, related to the Department of Agriculture Farmers Market, 61 CSR 38 is authorized to file it with the amendments set forth below. On page 6, striking out subdivision 6.2.H and inserting in lieu of a new subdivision 6.2.H to read as follows. 6.2.H, any potentially hazardous freeze-dried foods. 6494 Athletic Commission. A, legislative rule filed in the State Register July 26, 22, authorizing the authority of 295824 this code, modified by the Athletic Commission to meet the subjection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, refiled in the State Register October 20, 2022, relating to the Athletic Commission administrative rules of the West Virginia State Athletic Commissions. 177 CSR 01 is authorized. B, legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 27, 22, authorized under the authority of 29583 of this code, modified by the Athletic Commission to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on October 20, 2022, relating to the Athletic Commission, regulation of mixed martial arts. 177 CSR 02 is authorized. 6495 State Auditor. The legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 29, 2020, authorizing the authority of 12-3-13B of this code, relating to the State Auditor standards for voluntary payroll deductions. 155 CSR 03 is authorized. 6496 Conservation Agency. A, the legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 12, 22, under the authority of 1921A4 of this code, modified by the Conservation Agency to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on September 20, 2022, relating to the Conservation Agency, operation of West Virginia State Conservation Committee and Conservation District. 63 CSR 01 is authorized. B, legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 12, 2022, authorizing the authority of 1921A4 of this code, modified by the Conservation Agency to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, refiled in the State Register on September 20, 2022, relating to Conservation Agency, Conservation District accounting and auditing standards. 63 CSR 4 is authorized. 6497 Board of Dentistry. The legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 22, 2022, authorized under the authority of 30-4-6 of this code, modified the Board of Dentistry to meet the objections of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register October 4, 2022, related to the Board of Dentistry. Dental Recovery Networks 5 CSR 15 is authorized. 6498 Board of Funeral Service Examiners. 8, legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 27, 22, authorizing the authority of 36-6 of this code, modified by the Board of Funeral Service Examiners to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on October 4, 2022, relating to the Board of Funeral Service Examiners, Funeral Director, Embalming Apprentice, Courtesy Card Holders, and Funeral Establishment Requirements. 6 CSR 01 is authorized. These legislative rule filed in the State Register July 27, 22, authorizing the authority of 30-6 of this code, modified Board of Funeral Service Examiners to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on October 4, 2022, relating to the Board of Funeral Service Examiners, Crematory Requirements. 6 CSR 02 is authorized. C, the legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 27, 2022, authorizing the authority of 30-6 of this code, modified the Board of Funeral Service Examiners to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, refiled in the State Register on October 4, 2022, relating to the Board of Funeral Service Examiners fee schedule. 6 CSR 07 is authorized. 6499 Board of Landscape Architects. Legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 30, 2020, authorizing the authority of 30-22-7 of this code, modified the Board of Landscape Architects to meet the objection of the Legislative.
Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 32 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage. Request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 32 yeas, 0 nays, 2 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 3552 relating to per diem jail costs. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 3552 concerns per diem jail fees charged to counties for those incarcerated. The bill would allow a county to seek reimbursement for 1 day of per diem fees from a municipality for incarcerating individuals under specific conditions. The bill provides a formula for charging per diem fees that gives a discount to counties that incarcerate fewer than their prorated share of total incarcerations and increases the charges for counties that incarcerate more than their share of individuals. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results. On this question, 30 yeas, 2 nays, 2 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk has a title amendment.
Committee on Government Organization moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand in recess until 2 p.m., and I have one announcement.
Uniform Control Substance Act 15 CSR 02 is authorized. C. Legislative rule filed in the State Register July 29, 2022, authorizing the authority of 30-5-7. This code modified the Board of Pharmacy to meet the objection of Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register October 17, 2022, relating to the Board of Pharmacy. Registration of Pharmacy Technicians 15 CSR 07 is authorized. D. Legislative rule filed in the State Register July 29, 2022, authorizing the authority of 30-5-7. This code modified the Board of Pharmacy to meet the objection of Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on October 17, 2022, relating to the Board of Pharmacy. Pharmacy permits 15 CSR 15 is authorized. E. Legislative rule filed in the State Register April 4, 2022, authorizing authority of 30-5-7. This code modified the Board of Pharmacy meets the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee refiled the State Register October 17, 2022, relating to the Board of Pharmacy inspection 15 CSR 19 is authorized. F. Legislative rule filed in the State Register July 29, 2022, authorizing the authority of 60B-1H8 of this code modified the Board of Pharmacy meets the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on October 17, 2022, relating to the Board of Pharmacy. Donated Drug Repository Program 15 CSR 20 is authorized. 64914 Psychologist Legislative rule filed in the State Register on September 7, 2022, authorized under the authority of 30-21-6 of this code relating to the Board of Examiners and Psychologists Code of Conduct 17 CSR 06 is authorized. 64915 Board of Registered Professional Nurses. Legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 27, 2022 under the authority of 30-7-4 of this code relating to Board of Registered Professional Nurses. Requirements for registration, licensure, and conduct constituting professional misconduct 1960 CSR 03 is authorized. B. Legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 26, 2022 authorizing the authority of 30-7-4 of the code modified the Board of Registered Professional Nurses to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on November 10, 2022 relating to the Board of Registered Professional Nurses Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Licensure Requirements 1960 07 is authorized with the amendment set forth below. On page 7, by inserting a new 10.2 to read as follows. 10.2 in the case of national recertification, any licensure suspension shall immediately be removed and no further discipline may occur if information provided indicating that recertification has not lapsed. C. Legislative rule filed in the State Register July 26, 2022, authorizing authority of 30-7-50 of this code modified the Board of Registered Professional Nurses to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee refiled in the State Register on November 10, 2022, relating to the Board of Registered Professional Nurses Limited Prescriptive Authority for Nursing Advanced Practice 19 CSR 08 is authorized. D. Legislative rule filed in the State Register July 26, 2022, authorizing authority of 30-7-4 of this code modified the Board of Registered Professional Nurses to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee refiled in the State Register on November 10, 2022, relating to the Board of Registered Professional Nurses Continuing Education and Competence 19 CSR 11 is authorized. E. Legislative rule filed in the State Register July 26, 2022, authorizing the authority of 30-7-4 of this code modified the Board of Registered Professional Nurses to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee and refiled in the State Register on November 10, 2022, relating to the Board of Registered Professional Nurse fees for services rendered by Board 19 CSR 12 is authorized with the amendment set forth below. On page 1, subsection 2.4, by striking out number 30.00, inserting the number 20.00. On page 2, subsection 2.8, by striking out the number 35.00 and inserting lieu of the number 25.00. And on page 2, by striking out subsection 2.20 and renumbering the remaining subsections. After the Legislative rule filed in State Register July 26, 2022, under the authority of 68-9-5A, the code modified the Board of Registered Professional Nurses meets the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee around State Register on November 10, 2022, relating to the Board of Registered Professional Nurses practitioner requirements accessing West Virginia Controlled Substance Monitoring Program Database 1960 CSR 14 is authorized. G. The listed rule filed in the State Register July 26, 2023, authorized under the authority of 30-1-26 of this code relating to Board of Registration Notice, telehealth practice, requirements, definition, 19 CSR 16 is authorized. 64-916, Secretary of State. A, this listed rule filed in the State Register August 1, 2022, authorized under the authority of 3-3-2A of this code, modified the Secretary of State to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on November 10, 2022, relating to the Secretary of State early voting in-person satellite precincts. 153 CSR 13 is authorized. B, the listed rule filed in the State Register on July 29, 22, authorized under the authority of 3-1A-6 of this code, modified with Secretary of State Objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, refiled in the State Register on November 10, 2022, relating to the Secretary of State combined voter registration driver license fund. 153 CSR 25 is authorized. C, the listed rule filed in the State Register on August 1, 2020, authorized under the authority of 3-1A-9 of this code, modified with Secretary of State objections of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on November 10, 2022, relating to the Secretary of State administrative procedures for the non-public funding for election administration fund. 153 CSR 54 is authorized. 64-917, State Treasurer. A, the legislative rule filed in the State Treasurer on State Register on July 29, 2022, authorized under the authority of 36-828 of this code, modified by the State Treasurer to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on September 15, 2022, relating to the State Treasurer. Enforcement of the Uniform Unclaimed Property Act 112 CSR 05 is authorized. B, legislative rule filed in the State Register on April 21, 22, authorized under the authority of 18-31-9 of this code, modified by the Treasurer's Office to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register January 25, 2023, relating to the Treasurer's Office Hope Scholarship Program. 112 CSR 18 is authorized. C, legislative rule filed in the State Register on July 22, 2020, authorized under the authority of 1838-16 of this code, modified by the State Treasurer to meet the objection of the Legislative Rulemaking Review Committee, and refiled in the State Register on September 15, 2022, relating to the State Treasurer Jumpstart Savings Program. 112 CSR 20 is authorized.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 75 ayes, 1 nay, and 24 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 361, authorizing miscellaneous boards and agencies to promulgate legislative rules.
Are there title amendments? If not, the title as read by, are there title amendments?
There are. The Committee on the Judiciary moves to amend the title.
Questions on the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. Gentleman from 96.
Mr. Speaker, I move the bill take effect from its passage.
The question is on the motion that the bill take effect from passage. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 78 ayes, 1 nay, and 21 members absent, 2/3 of members having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. For what purpose does the gentleman from 96 seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, that the House recess until 2:30 p.m.
Questions on the gentleman's motion that subject to announcements, the House recess until 2:30. Are there announcements? Gentleman from 96.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet at 2:15 p.m. at the back of the chamber.
Gentleman to 72nd, Doug Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans will caucus immediately after floor session in the East Wing Committee Room.
Are there other announcements? If Gentleman 22nd, Doug Linville. Okay, if not, the question is on the motion that the House recess until 2:30. Those in favor of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. We are in recess until 2:30.